Incredibly wrong hot take. Illuminati and the Chinese Communist Party released the virus to discredit the use of expert consensus and computer models. So I'm taking this a bit tongue in cheek. This hot takes are the things people just kind of say, and they just supposed to be somewhat pithy or somewhat on point, but they just kind of bring this thing out of left field. For those who don't know what hot takes are, I don't know how many people don't. I guess a lot of people. That's the thing. A lot of people don't know what hot takes are. It is very possible that everyone you know knows what hot takes are. These things are kind of things people expect. People kind of they understand that, okay, this is knowledge that I have acquired somehow that other people might not have. But it's harder to think that you are in that other people that do not have that information sort of thing. But it's just as true that there's a lot of information that you and everyone else that you know does not know. There is a lot of information. For majority of the information that exists out there, you are in that group that does not know that information. Now, as pertains as to the current pandemic, there are many questions here that we don't know. Known unknowns, unknown knowns, known knowns, and unknown unknowns. I think one known is that there is something like the COVID-19, SARS, CCP virus, however you want to call it. It actually exists, and it has had an effect on killing certain people. A known unknown now is that we know that different countries and governments have taken different steps in order to combat this. Social distancing is something that most people have done, wearing masks and things like this, shutting down economies in some situations. And the unknown is what's the actual effect that it's had. It might be hard to actually find the complete actual details of that, but this is things that we might find out in the near future. As for unknown knowns, I think this is when you look at the World Health Organization, you look at the Chinese Communist Party, you look at the different governments of different countries all over the world, and I think they definitely know certain things that we don't know about. And there's certain things that they know that I do not think they will tell us. There's certain things that I'm pretty certain that they knew of before a certain amount of time, but they felt this wasn't the accurate time to actually tell the people about this. Or were these people going to panic or this and this? They just came to those things. I think that's a kind of unknown known, where it's unknown to me what they know, but I do think there's people out there that do know more about this than they are letting us know. Now, when it comes to the unknown unknowns, this is the interesting part to me. I think there's going to be a lot of changes from this. I have been saying that this is a sort of Rosetta Stone of human civilization, human instinct, human existence on Earth, where our civilization, our cooperation, and sorts, just the way we view life here, is going to get an upgrade. It's going to get some kind of level up after this event. We're going to get new abilities. Kind of if you're playing one of those role-playing games, or if you're in one of those isekai type of things, where you all of a sudden unlock something, and then now you have access to all these new things. Taking a pause, we're getting all these skill points. I kind of like to think of humans as kind of like the RPG characters, role-playing game characters, where at the start of the game or different levels, when you level up, you get certain skill points, and then you can put them in different things. And in some cases, you put certain skill points into one thing. Let's say you put it into dexterity, and then if you're an archer, you can use the archer thing. Then it gets to a point where you're like, oh, I've been playing this game for a while, and I don't really like being an archer anymore, but I have all these dexterity points. I don't have any points in my intelligence where I want to be a mage or something. And then it gets to a point where there might be some reset. There's some situations where you get a character reset, or you get some kind of extra thing that gives you the ability to take those points out and redistribute them. And I think this is the kind of thing. It's a pause, and then we're like, okay, we need to redistribute our points into certain things that are more applicable for the sort of reality that we find ourselves in. So in this case, the Illuminati thing, I don't think there is an outright Illuminati. I think, if anything, it's just a group of certain people who just have certain abilities for different reasons or not. In all fields, we have people who achieve at certain things and some who are average achievers. Most people are in the middle. And then there's some who are low achievers. And then the majority of people are just not involved in that sphere. You can look at this in sports. Take basketball, for example. If you're someone who plays basketball, chances are you played as a kid, you were just a learner, and then you played a bit in your teens and your early adulthood, but you never really got that good. You were just average to below average, and then the actual people who play it professionally are a very small group of people. Then you look at now the MVPs, the All Stars, and things like that. Now these are selecting the best at their current time, and then now you look at the Hall of Fame people. Now I think the Hall of Fame type of people are the people that I'm thinking of when I talk about the Illuminati here. How did they become those people? I'm saying when they're actually alive, they weren't somehow crippling everybody else, trying to prevent younger basketball players from coming up and joining the league and things like that so they can hold all the glory by themselves. I don't think you'll find that kind of thing. There was a mix of chance, time, hard work, the studying, the physical abilities, and things like this that made them be able to be in a situation where no matter what situation comes, I have a plan for this. I can adjust to this. And I think Illuminati, that's a kind of situation where they just have certain people who are in certain positions who just have plans and contingencies for pretty much everything that could happen. So when you have a chance like this, they have certain plans and they're saying, we think this should be the better way to do this. And now that this has happened, we'll do this. Whereas for majority of the human beings, this comes by and like, well, this was unseen. This was something I couldn't even think of doing. This is something I never imagined would happen. Essentially, for most people, this pandemic was an unknown unknown. But for the Illuminati, I would say, and just other people, some people involved, it would be more of a known unknown. As in, they know something about human nature. They know there needs to be certain things to happen, certain reactions to happen before they actually act in a certain way. Yet they don't know what would actually lead the humans to act that way. So now that people panic, now that people ask for XYZ, they want to relinquish this, the Illuminati has some plans like, okay, now we can do this. That unknown situation has occurred, but now we can actually do these things. And for some people in the other aspect, I think the scientists and people like that, now we're talking about an unknown known, where they know actually what a coronavirus is. They know the general aspects of this, but the specific one is unknown, and also the reaction that people are going to have it is an unknown. So they're coming from a position where they have some expertise and some knowledge on the key aspect, on the central aspect that's affecting all these other things. But a lot of other things are unknown to them. The human reaction, the economic reaction, the future reaction, how people will actually take that information. They might know the virus itself, they might know about coronaviruses, that's why it's a novel one, but they don't understand necessarily how this thing spreads, who has it, when it's going to end, how we actually defeat it, even though we have certain informations about this. It is a known factor of it. Now going back to this shortie, this is part of that shortie series where I take little thoughts that I condense and then I expand on them so we can have conversations, and I appreciate you guys taking your time to listen to this. I'm winding down here. Part of what I'm talking about with that whole situation of kind of going to affect climate change and consensus of scientists, it's because in these situations, these are well-meaning people. I think most of the people who are concerned about climate change are coming from a good place. They don't want the world to be worse for other people. But I want you guys to look at this as this Rosetta Stone event and ask yourself, with this supposed known factor of one thing, one virus, and its effect on human beings, how long does it take to actually find out information about it? What is the kind of parameters that you can test on this? You can actually isolate the virus. It is something that is a novel coronavirus. It is similar to other things. You can identify it. You can test it out. You can see exactly what it's made of. You understand that this thing is affecting biological humans in a certain way. We can actually find the groups of humans and kind of organize this thing and look at the amount of time and energy that has been put towards actually trying to find information about this from all over the world with the cooperation in a relatively, I would say, in a somewhat planned and organized manner. Now, think about the things that are unknown, the things that are leading us to have questions of what to do, how to do it, how to combat this, what ways is it going to react to in the future. Now think about the way people have talked about it. Some people have come out in support, some people have come out against it. Some projections have come out, which are just people putting in actual figures. Then other people report on these projections, and then they talk about other things. They focus on one thing, they don't focus on other parts. They're not telling you the entire type of information. For example, one of my big objections to this is the denominator in this situation. A very important thing is to understand how many people have this, yet people are just naming the numbers of people dead. They're saying this and this is going to happen in the future. They're saying, oh, we're going to have a peak. But how do you know? If this thing has been spreading in the population from months ago, then majority of the population already has it, then it's not necessarily a peak. It could be a situation where it's a peak in testing, and that's just you catching the tail end of it. It's already peaked in the actual spread, and now you're catching the tail end, and this is just a situation of reporting on it more, identifying it more, and then it's seeming like to be a growing problem. And just simply, if everybody is well meaning in this and just trying to do their best, and we still get into this kerfuffle situation where it's something that seems to be affecting all of us, where we can actually put these things down, think about it when it comes to something like climate change. What is the denominator of climate change? What is the core material? What are we comparing this on? How can we actually isolate and identify this? This is a tiny virus that we can take an actual sample of the virus and understand the full, it's not alive, it's a creature, but we can understand its full existence span. We can understand what this small tiny thing does in these different environments. Yet even though this Earth is just a blue pale dot, as Carl Sagan said in his Cosmos series, how do we isolate the Earth and understand what this biosphere's actual span is? Now, when we have these humans who are saying, okay, we've identified this one virus, and now we have to change how we do all these things on this entire planet based on this one virus, then you can understand why some people have certain concerns about the effect on the entire globe and having to change the things that we do. But just remind yourselves, even if people are well-meaning, what are they basing these things on? If we're talking about a virus, we can tell its entire existence cycle. Do we even understand a fraction of an entire climate cycle of their entire globe? Do we even understand anywhere close to the denominations? In this situation, we're wondering how many people have it. We can eventually test people and get a better idea of how many people actually have this virus, how many people have antibodies and things like this. But how do you test how many actual inputs and denominators need to be there when you're talking about something like climate change? When you're talking about the weather, the entire global weather, how many of these early actual projections of things like that did not take into account something as simple as the ocean currents? Many of you out there will talk about how there's issues with the CO2 coming in the air, but how many people actually accurately understand what CO2 does? People say, okay, we have these expanded farming of livestock and things like this, and then they say, oh, we're also killing the animals in the world. But then, okay, have we actually replaced all the animals that would have existed if human beings weren't doing what they are by doing things like factory farming with cows and chickens and other livestock, to getting those numbers much higher than they would be in a quote-unquote state of nature? Many people rightfully object to the whole situation of forests being cut down and say, oh, there's a lot of things we're losing in there, and that's actually losing the lungs of the earth. But how many of you do understand that algae is actually a majority of what creates the oxygen that we breathe? When it comes to solutions, people talk about green energy, but how many people understand that with green energy, which is better called, as Alex Epstein says, unreliable energy, and the people who are controlling these things do understand this. They understand we need power for the electric grid. They understand sometimes the sun won't shine, sometimes the wind won't blow. So instead, we're going to have these biomass plants to kind of put the backup into the electric grid. Now, biomass sounds more like, oh yeah, that's green. No, biomass is wood chips. They just chop down wood chips. And then you look at the actual countries that rely on wood, charcoal, and things like that, and they have deforestation a lot more than the advanced economies that rely on more modern forms of power generation. Another good reminder from this is look at how we've had past epidemics and past things, and then look at the technology that's changed here, how we've been able to change and address these with certain things that we had access to in the past, but the technology was different. So with that might be time for us to rethink the way we think about certain things that we have our ideas of. For example, something like nuclear power. We're talking about a whole different sort of human being and a whole sort of different nuclear power than we had back in disasters like Chernobyl. What are the known knowns? What are the known unknowns, the unknown knowns, and the unknown unknowns? It's time to think about this as we embark on this new phase of human existence here on Earth. And some of these things, what are you focusing on the benefit for? How many humans are you willing to die or not have life in the future in order to instigate some of these changes that you think have to happen, otherwise no human at all is going to live? Think about those projections, because this is already happening right now. There has been some pause, and there are some very immediate signs. You look at certain cities and things like that, and the air quality is better. You can see the city a lot clearer from very far. There's certain things that were considered to be reasons that were leading to actual climate change. They might have been people who were saying, oh, we can't do this and this because it has such and such effect on people. And now that these things have happened, like just restricting people's movements, having full shutdowns. I remember there was this movement of some people objecting, like, oh, it's illogical. We can't actually have people having a situation where the city is saying we can't have cars in the city for Tuesday and Thursday or something. And now we have a situation where it's weeks, months. There's no cars anywhere in like the state, anywhere in the country. So these things can happen. There are things that can change. But then now a lot of people will just grasp on these things and say, look, this affected, this actually changed it. There's going to be people who say like, oh, those figures that you're talking about with the climate change, why it's not actually mapping out is because we had this time in 2020 where we stopped for a few months and that actually ended up affecting these projections of the Earth's temperature that's going to change all over the globe for X amount of time. There's going to be people taking credit for things that where no credit is due. There's going to be those visuals, and these visuals are already being used, of looking at the city. And when you look at it, it's like, wow, that is nice. But then if you go out to the desert or something, and you look in the desert, you can see rather far in the desert. Take something like the pyramids, for example. If you look at them across the desert, you see the pyramids, and you see them clearer, and you're like, wow, that's amazing. Look at the pyramids over there. And then next to it, you see the city, and you see this sprawling city there, and you see all this maybe air pollution coming out, the waterways are done, and you're thinking, that's worse. But who are you focusing on? Are you focusing on these few dead humans from the past? Are you counting them as more important? Just this building? Or do you look at the people in that city and say, how can we improve life and still maintain the life of these people in the city? Because there are some people who are rather nihilistic when you actually look at what they're saying about certain things, and it is somewhat disturbing. So that's it for today. Like if you liked what I said. Dislike if you disliked. Also, let me know in the comment section either way. It's much appreciated. If you have not subscribed yet, please do subscribe. And if you're here on YouTube, click the notification button. And there's also links to a merchandise store where you can buy some stuff there. Or if you do have the ability and want to support me, there's also PayPal for one-time donations. Until next time, thank you again. Goodbye.